Hello, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Lauren.
And this is I've Got Guts, a podcast about living and thriving with chronic illness.
And all the things that take guts to say out loud.
We're here to talk about the hard stuff, the stuff that's messy, complicated, and often left unsaid.
From chronic illness to everyday life, we're creating space for honest conversations, real connection, and a lot of laughs along the way.
And just so we're clear, we are not medical professionals. We're just two best friends sharing what we've learned and what we're still figuring out.
So you don't have to do it alone.
Hello, everyone.
And welcome back.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to say it. Not happy Monday. Are Mondays ever happy?
Well, let's talk about your Monday today, which leads right into our thorns and roses because...
Yeah, my Monday was rough. I was really sick at work, which is never fun. I must have run to the bathroom at least 17 times. And then I got home and it got worse. It got way worse. I was like full aches, chills, you name it. Went to bed, woke up in the morning, and I realized the school germs have finally reached me. And it's not even the second full week of school.
Dun, dun, dun.
Like, what the heck?
I know. This is a fast one for you, Rome.
I feel that my body's fighting it. And so far I've only had like a low grade fever, but you know when you get like a fever and like that weird ache in your, I feel it in my upper body, my lower body. Like I took a nap today. Like it felt like there were 400 weights on top of me. Like I kept trying to wake up, but I couldn't.
I know, like chains, like you're chained down.
Yes, to the couch. I'm like, but I need to get up and do this. Really, what was I doing? But yeah, this one hit me hard.
I'm sorry, Rome. Back to school germs are the worst.
A real thorn in the side.
Double time.
Oh my God. It just like throws a wrench in everything. First of all, how am I already having to take a day off of work?
I know, but
maybe two. Like, this is insane.
But that is what sick days are for. I know. But it's frustrating to have it be this early on. We literally just got back to work.
Oh my God. But these germs are everywhere. From what I'm hearing, it's like flying around our school.
Oh boy, got to double up on
my immune shots.
Your immune boosters out there.
Oh my God. Well, what's your thorn?
Oh, my thorn is about Connor having celiac disease and him being gluten-free. You know, we're always navigating ensuring that he's eating gluten-free at school. And I was so sad. I picked him up from our Wonder Care program and he was so bummed.
Oh, no, not again.
I go, bud, what's wrong? Because first of all, he's having the best year. He's an amazing teacher. He's so happy in school. Thank goodness. So loving his new teacher. But this was the Wonder Care program and I pick him up. He's all sad. I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, Mom, I'm starving. They didn't have any gluten-free snacks for me.
What? This is like the second time.
So I ended up emailing. It just shows from the mouth of a 10-year-old. Yeah. I ended up emailing and saying, hey, we pay all of this. I thought the snack was included. They usually do a great job about, providing gluten-free. Right. They've been giving goldfish or Cheez-Its or whatever, but they also have an option of fruit and a cheese stick.
Oh.
He doesn't want the fruit or the cheese stick. He doesn't want the fruit. So I'm like, okay. So I send this whole email about including Connor and Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, he does always fruit, whatever, applesauce cheese stick is always available. And then they alternate the crunchy snack. So I'm like, if we could just have a crunchy snack available for my chip monster to enjoy, that would be great. But it just goes to show, as your kids come home and share things about school, take it with a grain of salt because he's like shaming Wonder Care. And I know they do a wonderful job there.
Shaming them.
But then it pulls on my heartstrings of like, I never want him feeling left out. That is the biggest piece for me. I always want him to feel included. Like tonight at football practice, good thing Sean was there. Sean called me. He's like, Connor just came over and I guess there's rumor they're ordering pizza for the boys after practice. No. And it was right before I came over here. I'm like, I got it. I always have pizza on hand. I threw it in the oven, cut it up. Sean grabbed it to bring it back so he feels included. God. So it's just, it's important to me. Yeah. He was pulling on my heartstrings, Connor O'Reilly.
This is like a preview of the episode everyone's about to get. You carry the pizza mental load.
I carried the pizza mental load. I sure do. Oh, well, let's lead that into our roses. What's your rose this week?
My rose is actually a really silly one, but I'm reading. I did the whole thing, like I finished my romance summer books and now I'm into my fall thriller books and I'm reading a book called The Housemaid. Been around for a while, but it's buzzing. And I'm like reading it, so into it. And then I see a thing online. It's going to be a movie coming out in December, and it's got a killer cast. It's got Sydney Sweeney, Amanda Seyfried, the guy that played Atlas in It Ends With Us.
Ooh, love
and then
him.
this like really hot looking Italian actor who's been in some weird things. But it's killer cast. The preview looks so good. I will say the book was a little triggering because I didn't realize it talked about fertility stuff. So I almost gave up on it because I was like, I can't do a book that has fertility stuff in it. But I powered through, and good thing I did because that's only like a very small part of the story. The rest is super twisty. But like, I get to go to the movies and see it like come to life in like a couple months. I'm pumped about this.
I love this. This is so exciting.
It doesn't take much to make me happy.
It's these little roses all about make your whole world.
Yeah, the trailer came out today and I watched it and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be great.
I love it. Yeah. Yay, Ro.
What's yours?
That's awesome. My rose is the feedback we have been getting from everyone, all of our listeners, especially some of our friends and colleagues, mine especially. It is filling my cup hearing people who listen and love it and feel a sense of just connection and belonging. So I'm going to read a text. Can I read this text?
I love it. Yeah,
okay,
read it.
So we got a text today from one of our friends, and she shared a screenshot of who she recommended our podcast to. And the message said, I've been listening to the podcast and love it so far. Definitely helps me feel less crazy/alone and has even encouraged me to get the endoscopy I've been so afraid of getting. I'm like, if they can do it multiple times, I can do it once.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your reviews. Our days are highs and lows, especially being back to school and navigating our new classrooms and just getting back into the swing of things. And our listeners, all of you, you are such a bright spot, and it really is a rose for me this week because this is just one of so many texts both of us have gotten. And I just read this one because it just came today, honestly, hours before I came over here.
And it's across the board. Like one of Anthony's coworkers came up to him and he's like, I'm loving the podcast. And you know what he loves the most? Thorns and Roses. Said he feels like he's really getting to know not just us, but Sean and Connor and like everybody, which is awesome.
I love it. Well, we appreciate all of you out there and your feedback and your just connection. We feel it and we love it. And we're so happy to be a part of this community and that you're here with us. So that is my rose this week. All right, let's get into our episode today.
So excited for this one.
We got a good one.
All right, today we are so excited to have Paige Connell, better known on Instagram and TikTok as she is a page turner, on the podcast today. If you follow her on Instagram or TikTok, you know she is one of the most honest and relatable voices out there talking about the mental load of motherhood and marriage. She has this way of naming the invisible work so many of us do, the remembering, the planning, the worrying, and helping people feel seen.
Paige is a working mom of 4, so she is definitely an expert in balancing motherhood, careers, and relationships. While she's not talking about the mental load, she's advocating for affordable childcare, paid leave, and reproductive rights. Things families truly need to survive in this world today. She has been featured in Scary Mommy, The Today Show, one of my favorite shows, Good Morning America, and more.
So today we're going to dive into what the mental load actually looks like in real life, how it impacts relationships, and how it can get even heavier when chronic illness is part of the picture. We'll talk about what's helped Paige share the load, set boundaries, and find ways to protect her mental energy.
Paige, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is so exciting. We definitely did our research.
We sure did.
So like just for any of our listeners who might not know who you are, how did you get started talking about the mental load online? And when did you first become aware of your own mental load? Like what was the moment that it clicked for you?
Sure. So that probably came first, the mental load part, obviously. So I became a mom only 6 or 7 months before the pandemic hit. So
wow.
I feel like so many of us, we were thrown into parenthood at this really tumultuous time. And so my early years of parenting probably weren't the norm. And so I tell people all the time that I went from no kids to 4 kids in 3.5 years, and there was a global pandemic on top of it, right? And so I lived this very specific life for a period of time. And when my workplace shut down and I went remote and daycare closed down, I really became the default parent for our family because my husband is considered a first responder. So he was never at home. And so he didn't get one day where he was home during the pandemic. He was always at work. And so I was the default. I worked from home with the kids. I was pregnant. It was just a crazy time. And every single time the kids got sick or somebody at their school got sick, it was me. It was my job to get them. Yeah. And so I always tell people the mental load hit me really early on. It was probably before the birth of my fourth child, probably 3 years into parenting. And it hit hard, but I feel like it is kind of a snowball effect for most people where it slowly picks up steam as it like rolls down a hill and gets bigger and bigger. And that was the case for me. I just think it happened much quicker because of the circumstances of the world. I think if there was no global pandemic, I still would have hit that exact same moment. It might have just taken me 6 years instead of 3. Right. Transparently. I just think it would have been a slightly different timeline. But that was, I became aware of it and it clicked for me. I'd been having conversations with my partner. I was trying to figure it out, but it clicked for me when I heard Eve Rodsky, the author of Fair Play, on a podcast. And she was just talking about invisible labor and the mental load. I don't even know if she used the term mental load, but she was talking about all these ideas. And I was like, oh my gosh, she is naming every single thing I've ever thought in my brain. And I didn't know how to say or how to communicate. And so that was the beginning of my journey with my partner, was hearing Eve and then ultimately reading her book and starting off with Fair Play and her method. I didn't start sharing it online until an entire year and a half later. I had been posting on TikTok maybe almost a year, just shy of a year. And one day on a whim, I was like, a year ago, I probably would have told you I was considering divorce, and this is where we are now. And I just kind of shared the experience and I named the mental load and all the dynamics that happened, and was shocked to see how many people resonated with that message and specifically resonated with how maybe I was describing it. And that was kind of, that's how it happened. It was just very organic. I was just living it in my own life and one day decided to share it.
Yeah. So authentic and just so true, So,
that's how I found you. I was single for so long and I didn't get married until I was 40 something. So like living on my own for so long and then being like living with someone else, like I became so aware of the mental load. I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize how much I actually did.
Right. You don't until you name it.
Right. Exactly. So for listeners who may not know, could you explain what the mental load is? And can you kind of give an example, which you kind of sort of already did, about just how it feels to carry it in everyday life?
Sure. So there's the kind of like clinical ways of describing it. It's cognitive labor, emotional labor, invisible labor. It's all this work that we're doing that tends to not be seen by everyone, or it is often done kind of behind the scenes. So I like to describe it as the never-ending to-do list in your brain of everything you need to know, do, and remember. So planning, anticipating, helping your toddler regulate their emotions, right? Like all these little things. And the tricky part about this mental to-do list is it never gets shorter. It only gets longer, right? So every time you check something off, it feels like something else was added to your list. So I like to use dinner as an example because pretty much everybody eats dinner, right? And so if you cook dinner and you use an ingredient, now you've cooked dinner, but you're adding something to your grocery list, or you have to remember to add it to your grocery list, right? You finish dinner and your kids wouldn't eat it. So now you're taking a mental note of saying, kids hate this meal, can't make it again. And as you're going through, right, your to-do list, all the things you need to know, and remember, it's getting longer. You've checked off dinner, you cooked a dinner, but now you have more things to think about and to plan for and to do. And so I think for a lot of people, it feels different, but I think for most of us, that carry it in a disproportionate way, because I will say this. Every single person has the mental load. This is not unique to women. This is not unique to marriage. It's not unique to parenting, right? I like to say sibling dynamics are a good example of this. Who's thinking about mom at the holidays? Who's buying her a gift?
Yes. Zero.
That's the mental load, right? Who's the sibling who's texting everybody, hey guys, I got mom a gift. Can you Venmo me? Right? That's the mental load. So it exists in more relationships than I think we tend to think about. It's not just marriage. It's not just parenting. It's in all dynamics of life. But it's exponentially heavier, I think, in parenthood in particular, and in marriage because you're cohabitating with people. And it can feel very, very heavy. And when when you are the person carrying an unequal amount of it, it can cause resentment and frustration. And that does not breed a healthy, happy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not.
It definitely does not. Totally have been there for sure.
I feel like you kind of touched on this next question. Like, what's one of those tiny invisible tasks that nobody notices but eats up so much mental energy? Like, dinner is kind of a perfect example.
Dinner, school lunches for parents. Like, I just did a post on that and everybody was sending me messages like, what do you make? How do you keep it cold? What if they don't? I'm like, I have all the same questions you all have about lunch. I think there's a lot of things, right? I think it's just simple things. My child has a doctor's appointment. When I'm at the doctor's appointment, they say he needs a follow-up. I have to schedule the follow-up. When I schedule the follow-up, they say I need to fill out this paperwork and I have to check with his insurance, right? It's never just as simple as a task. It's all the things happening behind that task. So yes, the actual appointment maybe took me 30 minutes one day, but the work I did up to that appointment, right? That is the mental load. So I think, you can name any task pretty much, and most will have some sort of mental load. There are some that maybe don't, but pretty much most of the day-to-day tasks you're doing will have some sort of mental capacity to them.
Right. And I think a lot of our listeners have chronic disease, chronic illness. So we're already dealing with pain, symptoms, not feeling well, and then carrying, the mental load of just everyday life. I think about, I have to pack my son's lunch and he has celiac disease, so he's gluten-free. So I'm always so the mental load of taking care of that, but then the stress of he needs to make sure he uses Purell or washes his hands before he eats. Is he going to do that? Did I put that in his lunchbox? And it's you have that mental load, and then you have just the layer of the chronic disease, and the worries as I carry as a mom, letting him out into the world, trusting that he doesn't poison himself,
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many layers to the conversation.
There really
I think there's
is.
so many layers to this conversation. And there's, when I talk about this conversation, I always talk about equity and how to find that, because to your point, it's if you're dealing with a chronic illness or chronic disease, equity and what a fair share looks like in your house might be different than in my house, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's an important thing to talk about. And people always, whenever I bring it up online, there'll always be somebody in my comments and say 50-50 is not possible. I agree. And I don't think we should be striving for 50-50. I think we should be striving for what feels fair for our homes. And that looks different for everybody.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about feeling good. That's what it comes down to, right? We're here to enjoy life, and you want to share that load.
Exactly.
If you're thinking about, do you ever catch yourself doing things you don't need to do just because you feel like you should? That ever happened to you?
I think it happens to all of us. Yeah, I think it happens to all of us. I would say, it's for your kids in particular, it's on Sunday, we took them apple picking, even though we had a crazy day of baseball and back-to-back birthday parties. But it was the one weekend I thought we could squeeze in apple picking.
We should do it.
And they love apple picking, and we always go with their cousins. It's this core memory. And it's not that I felt like I should. It was a combination. It's they're expecting it. If I don't do it, they'll be disappointed. I will have this layer of guilt because I didn't do it. And if I don't do it, then I'm also going to have this layer of shame, which is I'm not the fun mom who sucked it up and did it. Right. And so I think that's a silly little example, right? But I think there's plenty of those where it's, you signed up to volunteer when it adds work to your plate or whatever it might be. I try really hard to know what my limits and boundaries are, but I am also like so many other women, I think in general, I'm a big people pleaser, and it's a problem. We're all working on it. And so sometimes, it's hard to say no. And I totally get that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Totally. Absolutely.
People pleaser over here.
Oh my gosh. Wear the badge or the whatever it is, the sash.
Yeah. So are women more prone to carrying the mental load than men? And are there is there research on that or percentages? And why do you think that imbalance exists?
There's a lot of research on this, and it varies based on which study or data you're looking at, right? So amongst parents in particular, women report carrying, I think, 71% of the mental load in their relationships, which is a staggering amount, right? And when you do look at the breakdowns too, it's like the things that they carry versus the things that men carry, even when it comes to the mental load, vary, right? Men will list things like playing with the kids, where women will list cooking dinner, right? As the mental load they carry. And so it's very different. There's a lot of studies on time use. And I think time use and mental load are really correlated, which is that women spend more time on domestic labor, more time on childcare. Men have more time for leisure, hobbies, and fitness. And so women have less time for that. So it's a leisure gap, a fitness gap, a hobby gap. There's a gap in how we spend our time. You can even extrapolate that out from there and look at the wage gap between men and women, specifically mothers and fathers. The wage gap has widened in the last 2 years. So for the first time in many, many years, the wage gap is widening between mothers and fathers. Yeah. And it's this interesting thing where people say, like, women are in the workforce, women have an education, women have the same opportunities, but there is this motherhood penalty because women take on the bulk of the childcare, the bulk of the mental load, the bulk of the domestic labor responsibilities. And so, yeah, there's data on this, both on how we spend our time and the mental load and what that looks like and how that kind of impacts other things like our careers and our wages and overall health outcomes. If you think about it, it's like if you're the person carrying a disproportionate amount of the work, women in marriage are worse off than men in marriage. Single women tend to be healthier than married women, right? All of these things, they're not all like in one study, right? But you can kind of have a through line between these things about kind of what this work means for women.
It's like that ripple effect, you know? Mm-hmm. It really is. So thinking about starting conversations, how do you recommend couples start an honest conversation about sharing the mental load without blame or resentment? And I'm looking over here because Steph just recently got married and moved in with her husband.
Thank you.
And then I've been with my husband for over 20 years. So, and so we're both at very different points. So I've already navigated that with my husband and still continue to this day. But for people who are newer at it, what advice do you have?
I think having the conversations early on are so helpful. I think it is. I mean, you even mentioned kind of getting married later can be tricky because it's like you have these established ideas and standards and expectations. And so you have to talk with another person about what that looks like. Mm-hmm. And when you're younger, I feel like you just don't know what to talk about because you haven't been an adult long enough, right? And it's like, well, I didn't realize we had to clean the lint trap in the dryer, right? There's so many things. And so I think the number one thing to do is, first and foremost, I like to tell people to talk about what your goal is in the conversation. Like, what's our goal? If you're already in it and things are hard and uneven and you're stressed out, burnt out and resentful, this conversation is going to be harder. And I would say if you are really deep into a relationship and you have kids and there's a lot at stake, it's even harder, right? Because you can't just say like, oh, this guy won't do the laundry, I'm out of here. You can't do that when you have like all your life tied up in someone, right? And I feel like, unfortunately, the internet these days is very black and white. So people go to the internet to look for advice and they hear like, oh, well, your partner is not good, or if he wanted to, he would. And I just don't think that's true. Mm-hmm. I think men weren't conditioned to see and take on the mental load. If we think about the messaging they receive from their families, from TV shows, from advertisements, just in general, the way we talk about motherhood and marriage to young girls. Like when I was little, people asked me if I wanted to be a mom. I don't think people were asking my husband if he wanted to be a dad when he was 5, right? I don't think people were. Yeah. Nobody was asking him. And so we are conditioned to do this work, not even just in the work at home, but in the workplace, right? Women tend to take on non-promotable tasks like party planning or taking notes during a meeting. And so knowing this, I like to go into it with good intention and assuming that your partner did not have ill will. Mm-hmm. I always like to say this. If your partner is good intention, they want you to be happy, they are willing to have the conversation, then go into it assuming that they did not intend to overburden you with this work. And talk about what the goal should be, right? Say you're starting from scratch. What is our goal? We want to have time for hobbies. We want to have time to see our friends. We want to be able to go on a date night once a month. I don't like laundry. I don't ever want to touch laundry, right? Whatever your goals are, you sit down and you say, these are our goals. And then get on the same page about what your individual goals are, but also what your goals are as a family or a couple, whatever that might be. And then make that invisible work that you both are doing as visible as possible. So I like to do it in my reminders app on my iPhone. So if you were to look at my reminders app right now, I'm looking at it. I have 13 tasks that I haven't finished for today, which is not great because it's nighttime, and 43 outstanding tasks total. This is my mental load. That's how I keep track of it.
Yeah.
And I suggest to people, I'm like, write it down in a notebook for a week, for 2 weeks. Every thought that pops into your brain. Oh, we need milk. I forgot the dog's flea and tick medicine. Oh, I need to take the trash out. Oh, whatever it is. I have to call my mom. Any of these things, just write it down. Write every single thing down in a notebook, in your reminders app. Just keep a list. Just track it. Not for the intent of going like tit for tat with your partner, but first and foremost to be able to understand the mental load you're carrying. Because I think oftentimes we come to these sit down chats with our partner and we say, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm doing so much. And they say, well, what do you want me to do? And then you go, well,
Shouldn't you just know? Shouldn't you just read my mind? Right?
The list is too long. I couldn't even tell you the whole list right now if I wanted to. So instead, I'm going to ask you to do something like take out the trash. And that's not really going to help me. And ultimately, we didn't get anywhere. And so what I think it does is it allows you to come together and see it and name it and understand it better and then work towards balancing it. So whether you use a method like Fair Play, which is a game you can do to kind of even the scales a bit more. It's a card game. I turned it into an Excel spreadsheet because that's how my brain worked. If you have a different way of doing it, that's totally fine. But I think the goal is to say, okay, let's walk through each of these tasks and talk about what the task is, but also what the mental load is associated with that task and decide who's going to own it. And then, have open conversations about, what are my strengths? What are your strengths? What do you hate doing? What do you like doing? And just work through that. And it's kind of a work in progress. It always is. Yeah. It takes a while, I think to your point, I'm 20 years into my relationship with my husband. We've been working on this for 3 years and we're still talking about it all the time. It's no longer heavy or loaded or a big deal. It's very much like, hey, you keep forgetting to order the groceries. I'm going to take the groceries over. You can do X, Y, and Z, but this dynamic's not working right now in this phase of life. So let's change it. You get to that point where you become like a well-oiled machine and you can have these conversations and really adjust as the needs of your family change.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it comes down to communication. The more open and the more communication you have with your partner, I think the more productive these conversations are.
Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of not just saying like, I need you to take out the garbage and do the dishes and whatever, but like you said, like naming what goes into that task because there's so much more behind it than just the task itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also this idea of like, if you sit down and you name it all and you work on a plan, I do like to tell people it doesn't happen overnight, right? You can't just drop 30 new tasks in your partner's lap and expect them to understand the mental load with all of it and to be great at all of it because you weren't great at it all. At one point, right? Like we all failed at something. We all messed something up. We all forgot to get our oil changed and like almost blew up our car, right? Like we've all done it. Yeah. So we have to have some grace for one another and work together through it. And so starting slow is fine. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but you kind of build up to this point where, you both are equally equipped to do the things and they know the mental load just as much as you do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
And then we kind of touched on this, but evolving over time, how should this conversation evolve as life circumstances change? So like starting a family or growing your family, things like that.
I mean, yes, any major life change is going to impact the mental load, a new career, right? A new child, a new dog, any of these things. Illness, anything could change the dynamics of your home. And so it's important that you're always talking about it. We were talking about sports before we started recording and it's like, your daughter joins the dance team. Like, oh, things have changed around here. Okay. Like we need to change how we're doing things. And this is, I think people think about these conversations as being this really heavy lift. And I think when you get to a point where you've had enough of these conversations, it really is just a check-in and saying, hey, 3 nights a week, she's at dance till 7. She's eating really late at night. How do we feed her before? Who's thinking about that? Who's packing that snack? Who's making a dinner that we can make when the other person's picking up the other kids, right? Like it's having those conversations together. And it's more about teamwork at that point and rebalancing together because life changes all of the time for all different reasons. It's constantly changing. I even think about something like a pipe burst in your bathroom. Like who's managing the contractor? Who's calling insurance? Who's doing that work? You have to talk about it. You have to talk about it. Otherwise, what happens is it does default to someone.
Right.
It defaults to someone. And oftentimes that someone is the woman in the relationship. Not always, but oftentimes. And so I think it's really important to kind of flex that muscle of just continuing to have those conversations at every kind of change that occurs.
Yeah. And I think about when we have flares, and I know so many of our listeners go with their diseases into those flare moments, and you really need to tap into your partner to help with that mental load because you are physically unable and mentally to do some of those things, you know? And I think I always say when my husband and I got married in sickness and health, he had no idea what he was getting himself into when he married me, but that communication is key. And knowing when he's got to take it all over because I'm unable to, you know?
Yeah.
And it kind of leads into the next question, you know, how can partners truly hand off tasks so they stay off their plate? Like one that you're like, nope, this is not the one I'm doing and this is for you. And what does that look like for you in your mind?
Well, so I think it depends. And I think it depends on your home and what the task is, right? But I think there's some things like in my house, for example, my husband cooks dinner. He cooks dinner because I do mornings by myself every single day. And so by dinner time, I'm tapped out. You know, I'm like, okay.
That's his time to shine.
Yeah. I've lived a whole life today. And, you know, you can cook the dinner. So at first we had to have conversations because he was like, I'll cook dinner. I don't mind cooking. I like cooking. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then every single night I would be sitting at this desk and he would walk into my office and he would say, what do you want me to make for dinner? And I'd be like, I don't care. And he's like, well, what do we have? And I'd be like, I don't know. Look in the fridge, look in the pantry. And then I'd be like, look at which meat needs to be cooked first and what veggie goes. I'm like, oh my God, why are you asking me this question? Right? Like, I thought you were cooking dinner. Why am I answering this? Right? So I think this is part of the thing about the mental load, which is it does take a little bit of time where I had to say to my partner, hey, if you're going to cook dinner, you also have to come up with dinner. Okay. Like I came up with breakfast and lunch and 14 snacks today. I need you just to think about what dinner is. And, you know, it's funny because once he started to be the person who had to come up with dinner, he's like, this sucks. And I'm like, yeah.
Welcome to my world.
I'm like, you liked dinner, didn't you? And now you don't. Because especially when you have kids, it's like one day they eat something, the next day they don't, right? And you're keeping track of all those.
Yes. It's like you just like that. And you ate it like 19 times. Now all of a sudden you can't ingest it. Something.
Exactly. And then we, you know, over time we got to a point where our life has been so chaotic and, you know, it's crazy. We were like, let's do a meal kit delivery service. Right. And so like he still cooks the dinner, he still makes it, but we outsource the meal planning essentially. And it's like, you know, we had conversations about this along the way. And we do that with a lot of different things. And I think it's important to, again, like if my husband were to say to me, hey, you need to take over, I don't know, snow blowing, which I do anyways, but sometimes. And I'd never done it before. Right. And I've never done it before. And he says, you have to do that. I'd say, okay, great. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know the best method. I don't know where the gas goes. I don't know how to turn it on. Like I can learn, I can Google it, I can figure it out just like he can, but he's not going to make me do that. He's going to tell me, you know, he's going to say, hey, this is like how you turn it on. And this is how you fill up the gas. And like, this is the best way to do it with our driveway. And it's essentially the way I like to think about it is it's sharing knowledge, right? Like he's sharing this knowledge that he has that I don't. And is it always fair that women hold a lot more knowledge than men in these situations and have to share a lot of knowledge? No. That's not fair, right? It's not fair in any sense in these relationships where it's unequal, right? But we also can't expect them to know it all overnight. And even a Google search isn't going to tell you what meals your kids are going to eat, right? Because you don't know. And so I think if you have inherent knowledge about something, it's going to take time to transfer that to another person. But they really do need to meet certain standards and expectations and be open to these conversations. Because I know there's a lot of men who will use weaponized incompetence or
you do it better,
do it wrong intentionally. And you're just better at it than me. And it's like, no, I've just done it 1,000 times.
Right.
That's why I'm better at it. Right. So, I want to acknowledge that some women definitely experience that, but I do think a lot of people that I talk to are very well-intentioned and want to do better and want to, you know, cook dinners their families are going to eat. But they've just never had to do it before.
Right. You know, I think about, this is making me think about my husband. I trained him on how to fold the laundry and do the laundry because he's never really folded it. And when we first got married, now he folds that laundry. It is like perfection. I can't even fold it that good, but it's because he's been doing it for how many years now, right? And I'm just
Right.
I'm like, that is all you because it's just beautiful. And mine is a hot mess when I try to fold the laundry. So
Yeah. And it's funny because sometimes men will say, especially my comment sections online, which is easy to say anything you want online,
Yeah,
but they'll
right.
say, no matter what I do, it's not up to her standards. She doesn't like it. I did it wrong. And I always push back a little bit and I say, I can't imagine she has these standards for no reason. Maybe some women do, but I can't imagine she has these standards for no reason. So instead of feeling like you failed or you can't meet expectations, maybe have a conversation and say, why is this the standard that you want me to meet? Why is this important to you? And I think you saying the laundry made me think about that because we fold the laundry a very specific way in order to fit it all in their dressers.
Yeah, right.
And, the Marie Kondo of it all, like the special folding. And it's like, I know that if I actually want to get all of these sweaters into this drawer, this is how I have to fold them.
Right.
And that's why I do it that way. So when I'm nitpicking or saying, hey, can you fold the sweaters this way? It's not because I'm saying you're wrong. It's because I'm saying I've done this a handful of times and I know that this is how they fit best in the drawer. And I would say we all are impacted by each other, right? So say your husband folds the laundry and he keeps putting it in the wrong drawers and you're the person who gets your kid dressed in the morning and you're like, we can never find the shorts. Like, why are you burying the shorts with the pajamas? Like, what's happening? That is not you having unrealistic standards. That's you saying, hey, when you do the laundry wrong, it actually impacts me. It makes my morning harder because me and him, we're looking for the shorts. We can't find them. It takes us an extra 5 or 10 minutes to get dressed. And I just need to get that out the door. So I think it's important to also connect those dots along the way when we're having these conversations, which is, it's really not about the folding. It's about the impact of the folding, which sounds silly, but it does have impact.
Yes. It does. It does. It literally leads to the next question I was going to ask you is when one partner forgets or doesn't fully plan something, how can you communicate the emotional impact without criticism? And I feel like you just touched on that beautifully.
Yeah. I think it's hard not to criticize and not to get frustrated and not to, so I want to validate people who've been there and done that. I think we all have.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think if you're specifically in this phase where you're trying to work through this together and you're like trying to shift the load, you can just come to your partner and say, hey, I noticed you folded the laundry, which great, thank you. But I also noticed that it was in the wrong drawer.
Right.
And I just want to talk to you about it. It's not a huge deal, but when it's in the wrong drawer, then I'm trying to teach our toddler how to get dressed by himself and then he can't find it. And if he can't find it, then I have to help him. And then all the work I put into teaching him how to get himself dressed is kind of wasted because I had to get involved anyways. Yeah. Right. And so not coming to your partner and saying, you're wrong, you do it all wrong. Why do I trust you? I'm just going to do it myself. Right. That narrative, those are two different conversations. And so again, this is assuming good intent, right? Not weaponized incompetence or any of those things. But I think it's just as simple as I try to teach my kids this. I'm like, don't assume that your sister meant to elbow you. Why don't you just say, hey, you elbowed me. Please don't do it again.
Right.
Let's not assume ill intent from one another unless it's there. But I think when we have that mindset, we enter in these conversations with a little bit more empathy for one another and in a more respectful and productive way.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I love how you start with that compliment, and you're assuming, the best intentions because usually
fearing how it affects you when things aren't done a certain way or the right way or done at all.
Yes. Yeah. The done it all one. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So do you suggest any systems or tools to clarify divisions and reduce constant reminders?
Oh my gosh, there's the mental load is a buzzword right now. So there are so many apps and tools and methods being created and built. And so I think pick your poison. What do you like? Do you like apps? Right. Do you like a digital calendar? I think there's a lot of different tools. I really loved Fair Play as a jumping off point. It was where I started my journey and I still highly recommend it. I don't think it's a perfect system. I think I tell people this all the time. Whatever method you pick, whichever app you're using, whatever tools you have, don't force your life to fit into them. Make them work for your family, right? So if a part of Fair Play doesn't work, a part of Fair Play that doesn't work for us is sharing tasks. It's very specific in the book. I think they're actually changing this, that you shouldn't share tasks. So if my husband is owning the task of the laundry, then I'm not touching the laundry, right? That's his task. In our home with 8 loads of laundry a week, like
all hands on deck.
Yeah, that's not happening. And so we share some tasks. Do I do the majority of it because it's mostly my task? Yes. But like if I forget to switch it, he's going to switch it and fold it. It's just very much, we're working together. So I always tell people, don't try to force a method to work for your family. Just try to figure out what you like from it and take that with you. I would say there's a lot of different tools now for actual like day-to-day management, which is great. And they can kind of be the accountability tool. So you don't have to be the one texting your partner, reminding them. The app can do that.
Love that.
Again, yeah, it's great.
That.
Yeah, it's good. But it is obviously reliant on your partner using the app. I think there's a lot of people who don't use the apps, but I think, for me, it's really about going in together with intention and accountability and saying, I am going to own these things. And one of the reasons I actually turned Fair Play into a spreadsheet is because I wanted us to be able to go back and look at it and say, hey, like you raised your hand to do this task and now you're not doing it. So like you put your name down here, you said you were going to own it, you're not owning it. Why not? What do we need to change? And if you're not going to do this task, let's reassess because, it keeps defaulting to me. And I liked being able to look at that spreadsheet and say, what is it? The paint is in the what does that say? It's right here.
Yeah. The proof is in the pudding.
The proof is in the thing. I was the paint is in that. I was like, what is that?
It's been
late.
A long day.
It's late. So I think that's the thing for me, which is like having something you can look to that's like almost like this third party to say like, hey, the app's the one reminding you, not me. Right. It can be helpful, honestly. It can kind of take out that like nagging dynamic a little bit that comes up in these conversations.
Yes.
But it really does. I will say there's so many different ones now. You can really figure out what works best for your family, whether it's, the calendar or a lot of them have AI built into them now. I mean, there's like a never ending list out there.
So I've had Fair Play in my Amazon cart for like a year now. I feel like I actually need
You haven't read it? You should read it.
I have to read it. But yeah, I think the nagging takes a toll on you and you start to feel like, why am I always asking? So I think like having that third party thing that can remind, so you're not the one saying, hey, you said you would take care of the bathroom, but like it's been 2 weeks. It's nice to have that taken off your plate because then that's another task in your mental load is reminding them to do their job.
Oh yeah. In that instance, the mental load is still wholly with you. Like, I mean, the mental load is on you. If you are the one being accountable to making sure it gets done and reminding your partner to do it, they don't own the mental load. They're doing a task. They're doing the physical work of cleaning a bathroom. They are not carrying the mental load. And I think that is actually a big disconnect you've just landed on between a lot of men and women, which is men will say, I cook dinner. I take out the trash. I do tubbies with the kids. And it's like, okay, but you didn't plan dinner and you didn't buy the groceries and you didn't, any of those things. Like you cooked the dinner that I told you to make, but that's not the mental load. That's just a task. And it's valuable and it's important and it takes time, right? But you need to own the whole thing. And so I think that comes up. And then I just want to say on the nagging portion, the dynamic of nagging comes up so much in this conversation. And a lot of women will say, I don't want to be a nag. And especially when they're transitioning this, it can feel like you're a nag because you're reminding your partner and checking in and asking them. But what I found is a lot of times, men will come to their partners and say, like, I'm happy to help. And then she'll say, great, can you do X, Y, and Z? And he will say, sure. Can you just remind me? She says, okay, sure, I'll remind you. And then she reminds him. And then he doesn't remember to do it. So she reminds him again. And then he goes, oh my gosh, you're such a nag. You're always on me. Like, what the heck? And she's sitting there going, like,
you asked me. You actually asked me.
Wait, I'm not the crazy one.
Yeah. And it's like, but so many women will say, I don't want to be a nag. I don't want to be this. And I'm like, I totally get it. I get that. But you're actually not being a nag. You're holding your partner accountable to what they said they were going to do. which is unfair. You shouldn't be in that position where you feel essentially like the manager of your partner. Nobody wants to feel that.
Yeah.
And your partner, if they're committing to doing something, it is their job to do it. And so part of these conversations is also setting expectations and standards. You are agreeing to clean that bathroom. We need to agree on what the timeline is and what the standards are. We have to agree on those things, because if we don't, we're not going to get very far.
It makes sense. It really does make sense. You've got to have those boundaries. You have to have that communication and know that it's ever evolving to this conversation. It's not like a one and done, right? As life changes, it's changes. It's the reality there. Thinking about just burnout and just coping with all of just life in general, what are any top tips you have for preventing just burnout and protecting your energy when you can feel maybe one partner is really just carrying all the load? Any other little piece of advice? Or you hit on a lot of it, which is just so valuable, everything you're sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think something I tell people is kind of like another layer to this conversation goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is time equity, how we spend our time.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the person who is carrying the mental load, even if they're not physically doing all of these tasks mentally, they're burnt out and exhausted and they're never not thinking about something. And if you're never not thinking and keeping a to-do list, if you're not the person who's laying in bed and then popping up to be like, oh, shoot, I have to add this to my reminders, right? Then your time feels different, right? You have more space, time, energy. And so I often tell people to look at their time, kind of do like one of those data studies I was talking about, and look at your time use. How are you spending your time? How's your partner spending their time? Do you have time to see your friends? Do you have time to just rest? Do you have time to work out or read a book? So many women will tell me, I love reading. I never get to read. I have no time. And men will be like, I trained for a marathon. And I'm like, what? Like how, and it's their time is spent very differently. And I think that also leads to burnout. The thing for me that really was leading to my resentment and burnout wasn't just the work. It was the fact that I had no time for myself. I felt like I had to squeeze in tiny, tiny little moments for myself. And even then it wasn't fully rested because I was, checking my phone or answering an email or whatever it is. And so I think it is really important to build in, if you can, some protected time. So like for me, that might be 2 nights a week where I'm just off the clock, going to yoga, seeing a girlfriend for dinner, whatever it might be. I really do think it's important to have that space for both partners, but in a way that feels fair. Because I think, again, the person who's carrying an unequal amount of this tends to not have the actual time to think about, laying on the couch and reading a book for 30 minutes.
Yeah. And it's sometimes hard to explain to your partner, like, how much space the mental load actually takes up. Like, there have been times where my husband's like, why can't we just sit down and watch TV? And I'm like, oh my God, because I've got to do this for the house and this for the house and this for my job and this for my job. And we're going through IVF right now. So on top of that, I'm like, oh my God, I got to order the meds and I got to message the clinic. And I can't shut that off. So it's hard for me to just like sit and relax when I know there's like 800 things I have to do.
Yeah. And I think something like IVF is a really good example of the mental load. I also did IVF for my 2 youngest. And I had these crazy calendars and these Google Docs that I created of like what time I'm taking the meds, what day that they're being delivered, how much blood work I'm getting. And it wasn't just like the tracking of like the meds and the blood work and all the things. It was also tracking like, if this cycle were to work, what would this look like? Right? Like I was tracking everything and I was doing all of this work. And my partner was like, wait, what day do I have to come? I'm like, what? I spend hours a day on this stuff, right? And to your point, emailing with my clinic and checking all the things. And I think, he administered my shots every single day, but he wasn't the one kind of doing the work of like figuring out when they were getting delivered and making sure I was home and all the things. And so I think people ask me, when does this dynamic start in relationships? And I always tell them it starts well before kids, well before kids. It often starts. Yeah, a young girl asked me recently, like, I'm dating this guy, we're moving in together. How do I start to have these conversations? And I said, a good example, I think, is weddings. I assume you're starting to go to some weddings. Who's buying the card? Who's booking the hotel? Who's figuring out the outfits? who wrapped the present, who did all the coordinating of the lodging and all of that. So, like, who's doing that?
Yep.
If you bought a gift for his cousin's wedding and you bought the card and you booked the hotel, if you did all those things, you're probably carrying the mental load in an unequal way. And it probably doesn't feel heavy right now because it's fun and it's light and it's a wedding and it's not a big deal. Do that every single month for the rest of your life for little things here and there. It gets pretty exhausting. And then you add kids on top of it, right? So I tell people it starts well before kids. It's just you don't notice it as often.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. It's quite the journey. I feel
like you said it. I didn't think about this, but it started with my brother. Once we were old enough to do holidays and stuff, I was the one buying the presents. I was the one getting the card. I was the one chasing him around the house to sign his name. And now I don't know if he even sends cards because who's there to remind him?
Right.
Yeah, who knows? Honestly, who knows?
It is
his wife does it actually. The cards.
But that comes up oftentimes too, which is the burden, right? We as women, right? You're talking about your brother. My brother is married to a woman. My husband's somebody's brother. Oftentimes, like you said, that dynamic has existed before a romantic relationship in other ways. And so when they come into this new dynamic, now you're assumed to take on that role of sending the card, thinking of his mom. And there's actually a term for it called kin keeping, which is when women or a significant other is expected to maintain a relationship with their partner's family on their behalf, which I think a lot of women find themselves in that position where they're texting their mother-in-law and they're buying the gifts at the holiday and they're checking in with their nieces and nephews and they're doing that work on behalf of their partner. And if they were to truly not do it, that partner might not reach out to his family or send a gift or write a card or see them for brunch on Mother's Day. That just might not happen. And I think a lot of women, you asked about what are some things that you do because you feel like you have to. I think a lot of women do that work because they feel like they have to. If they don't, they'll be labeled as the kind of like toxic daughter-in-law who, this is all murky waters. I always tell people, I'm like, you start talking about one thing and then you end up talking about something else because it's all connected. Like all of this is so connected. It is not one thing. It's not as simple as saying it's cooking dinner because the cooking dinner part happened because of like years of conditioning that we all went through.
So true.
This is so funny. Actually, I have like a perfect example of this. I made my husband write all his wedding thank yous to the people in his family, but he forgot to write the thank you for the present part. He just said like, thank you for coming to the wedding. So I was like, oh my God, you have to redo this. And he's like, no, I don't. Why? And I said, because it will default back to me. They're like, oh, his wife. Oh, she didn't thank us. And he's like, that's not true. I'm like, that's actually so true. That's a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It comes up in subtle ways, right? It might not be overt, but yeah, I think people do think about that. And we know this in society. They're just double standards. Women are held to a higher standard for certain things than men are. And I think that is why men are so easily able to be like, who cares?
Yes.
And it's like, well, the person who's about to get an angry phone call cares.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be at the receiving end of whoever's coming at me about this.
Yeah, all of a sudden oh, he married her. I'm that girl all of a sudden.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. So thinking about yourself, do you have like a tell that you're doing too much that your partner can kind of like recognize? And does he ever like course correct you? Does that ever happen?
No, I think, unfortunately, there's no tell because I just say it.
That's a signal. That is very frank.
Yeah, I think people can tell that about me. But yeah, I'll just say like, I think even, it's not always with domestic labor, right? Like because we don't exist in bubbles, right? We have jobs, we have friendships, we have things outside of our home that we take on. And so the last few weeks have been really busy for me work-wise. And yesterday, I think I was feeling it between like speech therapy and work and school and dance and all the things. I was like, oh my God. And I just say it out loud. I just say it and I name it and I talk about it. And so I think sometimes that's hard to do because when you're in it, you don't even realize you're overwhelmed or burnt out by it until somebody else does. But for me, I think it really just comes down to like when I am burnt out and resentful, I have no capacity to like care about other stuff, right? So like, I don't care what TV show we watch. I don't care what we have for dinner. I don't care. I don't care. And it's not that I don't care. It's that I have no capacity left to care about anything else, is what I used to tell him. I am at max capacity. I cannot make one more decision. I can't answer one more question. I can't think about one more thing. You could put a plate full of anything in front of me. I will eat it. You could put anything on that TV. I will watch it. I do not care. And I think that would be a tell.
That'd
right?
be your tell.
That's a tell.
I think that might be my tell too.
Yeah, it's just, I think that's the thing. A lot of men will say things like, oh, well, she just doesn't have sympathy for me, or she doesn't seem to have energy for me. And I think a lot of women find themselves saying, it's not that I don't want to, it's just I'm tapped out. I'm tapped out. I don't even have time to shower, let alone worry about whether or not I'm spending enough time with my husband. Right. And that's a bummer. And I tell men that all the time. You want to have a happy, healthy, thriving relationship. You want to have fun with your partner. You want to have a good time. You can't have it if your partner's burnt out.
Yeah.
Like nobody's having fun in that situation.
Yeah.
So true.
It's so true. I feel like my tell is I just get emotional and break down. I just start crying over the smallest problem. And it's not about whatever just went wrong. It's bigger picture.
Yes.
The emotions flood out of me. So if anybody is kind of drowning, we're talking about this, right? If anybody's drowning right now, what's one baby step they could take to make things kind of feel lighter? If you could give them one little piece of advice for our listeners, and keeping in mind, a lot of our listeners are struggling with their health, with their symptoms. Like, where do they even start?
I mean, I think the very first place to start is just being able to name it. I know we said that, and it doesn't actually change the weight of it, but doing some work, if you can, to like step back and look at everything that's happening and try to name it why you're feeling the way you are, right? And looking at that invisible work we talked about and just the state of your home, your life, your health. And I think sometimes when we can look at it and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? That's why I feel this way. Yeah. That alone can alleviate some of the weight of it. Not that it goes away, but being able to name it and see it validates it. You no longer feel like you're making it up or that like you have to push through, because I think, you know how people are like, would you say that if you criticize your body or something? Would you say that to your best friend? And you're like, no, I wouldn't say that to my best friend. And it's like, then why do you say it to yourself? Yep. I think it's the same thing with the mental load and all this work, which is if you looked at it on a piece of paper and you'd say to your friend, yeah, like this is completely unsustainable. Nobody can do this, right? Yeah. There's too much on your plate. You can't do this. Giving yourself that, right? Looking at it and saying, okay, if this wasn't me and I was looking at this, what would I tell my friend? And from that lens, like what would I tell them to try and offload, stop doing, pass off to a partner? What are the things they can let go of, or what are the things they absolutely have to do? Right. And unfortunately, not everybody has the solution or the tool to just offload. But I think just being able to say like, okay, if this were anyone else, I would tell them it's unsustainable. So now that I know it's unsustainable, I'm going to have a little bit more grace for myself when I drop the ball, or when I can't do this certain thing, or when I cancel dinner with my friends, or whatever it is. I have a little bit more space for myself because, I've named it, I've seen it, I know what I'm carrying. And that alone, I think, creates space for change.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. It comes down to giving yourself grace, being easy on yourself and to yourself, because you're not going to move forward in a productive way when you're always, hating on yourself.
And I think if you have a chronic illness, another piece of this puzzle that's really important is to, from the get-go with your partner, talk about when I'm in a flare or when I'm really sick, this is what it looks like. And this is what will happen to me. And that means I won't be able to do A, B, C, and D. And I might need extra help at that time. Like, is that something you're okay with? Like, just being very upfront about what those times look like for you and how you need help in those times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love it. True.
Paige, this was so awesome. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing so openly. I know a lot of people are going to feel very seen by this conversation.
Yes. And it's definitely a hot topic or a buzzword right now. Yeah. So I think it's so relevant, and it helps people feel validated in their feelings. And if you kind of connected any of our listeners to what Paige shared today, we can follow her on Instagram. And what is your Instagram handle?
At She Is a Paige Turner.
I love it. So catchy. And I have to say, I've been binging your content, just going through the sunscreen one. I resonated with so much this summer because I married a very Irish man who, yes, and my son is also very prone to burn. So I was like watching your sunscreen ones. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes.
That one
like
really seemed to.
Yeah. I was like the sunscreen patroller, tire vacation. And then when I wasn't, I was shamed in the night for it.
I hear you.
I love it. But for our listeners, her content is full of reminders that you are not alone out there.
Yep. And as always, if you know someone who would benefit from this episode, give it a share.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here with us and taking time out of your busy schedule and your busy night. We really appreciate you and all you're doing to kind of spread awareness. It feels good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Great. You have the best night.
You too.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
If you have been enjoying the podcast, we want to tell you that the best way you can support us is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review wherever you listen to your podcast. That really is the only way we can reach more people, grow the show, and keep having these important conversations.
Yes. And go to our show notes or our social media and sign up for our email list. It is the best way to keep up with everything we've been up to. So episode drops, and avoid getting lost in the ever-changing social media algorithms.
Oh, they frustrate me.
And you can follow us at I've Got Guts Podcast on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook.
And you can email us at ivegotgutspodcast@gmail.com.
All right, everyone. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.